A witness tells CNN that security forces on motorcycles charged a group of 150 people gathered in Tehran, beating them with batons as they fled. Large crowds gathered near Tehran's Revolution Square. Let's get more now from Reza Sayah, monitoring developments in Islamabad, Pakistan. Reza, what are you hearing?
Yeah, Jonathan, for the second time in a week, Iran's opposition movement has come out and protested in the streets of Tehran and at least two other Iranian cities, according to witness accounts, despite a government warning and threats not to do so. It's about 6:30 in Iran right now. The activity started about 3 hours ago. Some amateur video clips have been posted on YouTube. Very difficult to gauge how many people are out. Witnesses are telling us that protesters are popping up in pockets in neighborhoods and areas throughout Tehran. They say protesters have been met by a huge number of security agents, oftentimes on motorcycles carrying batons or on foot. We have witness accounts of clashes in major intersections and squares in Tehran, and at least 12 people detained, according to people we've been talking to. According to witnesses, and this is something we've seen several times before, security agents in large groups on motorcycles are actually riding up onto sidewalks and beating protesters there and chasing them away. Witnesses also telling us that protests taking place in the cities of Esfahan and Shiraz. As is often the case with protests by Iran's opposition movement, they seem to be overpowered by these security forces who are armed. Even so, it looks like they're determined to stand their ground and make their grievances heard. This rally today was called by the opposition movement in memory of two young men killed during last week's protest, Monday's protest, Sana Jaleh and Mohammad Mukhtari. Iranian authorities say they were killed by protesters. Protesters say that's a lie. They were killed by Iranian security forces, Jonathan.
Reza, this is not like the sudden uprisings that we've seen in Arab countries. Iran had its uprising back in 2009, and it was brutally suppressed. How does that experience color what we're seeing now, do you think?
Well, you're right. This was a movement that exploded onto the scene after the two grievance was that President Ahmadinejad wasn't elected legitimately. They called for another election, but when they saw that the government rejected their call, they started calling for the ouster of the supreme leader, the President Ahmadinejad. You're seeing similar calls today. This movement was quiet for about a year, and I don't think there's any question that the comeback was sparked by the events in Egypt and Tunisia. But I think right now, based on what we're seeing, they're facing the toughest government crackdown ever. And still, there's no evidence that this regime is in any kind of danger of being toppled, or any evidence that with these street protests, this opposition movement has any ability to affect real political change. Even so, despite the odds, despite the threats and warnings, they're still out there making their grievances heard, Jonathan.
Reza Sayah in Islamabad. Thanks very much.